my side, because as you know, I'm from the academic side here. We have industry. This is a very interesting session, because now we really are coming from let me say, with a lot of experience how to bring in a new product into the market finally, the clinic trial first. And we're discussing here, especially also in Switzerland and Europe, how we can bring now nanotechnology, and especially nanoparticle. What we have here, we have nanoparticles, we have drug delivery systems. Hafnium is at the moment not present, hafnium oxide, but there we have the discussion. What we have here is, for example, if we speak about nanotechnology and regulation and how to bring it into the market, how far, what is your experience, how far we have to go from the academic side to how we have to do the tox test, how far we have to go before industry is interested to take over this and to go ahead to clinical test. One, we have an example. You have developed this more or less in your house, but in cooperation within academia. And we have here the example from China, which is from the institute. Even they're building up pilot plants to go ahead with these things. So maybe you can comment this question, please. So start with you.
Yeah. Sure. So ours is a difficult business. Maybe it's a stupid business. Yeah. Broadly speaking, in pharma, biology is very difficult. Most things don't do what you want them to do. You never know as much as you need to, to create therapeutics. And so there is an awful lot of hurdles that one has to get over in order to get into the clinic and then ultimately to the market. And we tend to focus. The scientific community tends to focus on the sexy part of this. Does it work? Does the biology make sense? But I think the biggest barrier to industry taking some of these technologies forward is manufacturing. The very non-sexy CMC, particularly for nanotechnology, because we're often talking about a different set of materials than pharmaceutical industry is used to. We're certainly talking about characterization in a different way than we're used to, and not only is that expensive, it's just a different way of thinking. I think, and then of course the corollary to that is finance. Finance is going to fuel all of this, and you can't get to finance if you can't show, scalable, consistent manufacturing. Now, I think we've come a long way in nanotechnology over the last half decade or so on industry understanding and appreciating the value of nanotechnology, and we've come a long way in manufacturing. But I think that's ultimately the big hurdle. At Arrowhead, we are lucky because the delivery technology we're using is understandable, in the broader pharmaceutical field. These are just peptides. Now they do things that other peptides don't generally do in pharmaceuticals, but they're peptides, and so people understand how to make these things and to scale them. But if you look at other strategies, it's a much larger hurdle.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Shemi?
Yeah. With your permission, I want to start with my grandma. When I have headache, she put a towel, and that's really helped. So I want to take this approach for ladies that didn't really understand in biology and in the bits and bytes, but she took the overall perspective, and that's, I think, what the industry like to see. They want to see the end results, which is a drug that helps people. And if you go to the academic and you go to the laboratory, every scientist used to work on a very, very specific, whatever, pathway, nano trick or whatever. And I think this is the main gap. I mean, between doing fantastic things which are very specific, works fantastically in some specific example, and to convert them not to the industry, but the end result, a drug that people will buy. That's the gap. And as long, and this conference, it's not nano, it's nanomedicine. So the gap needs to be bridged by somehow where the academy will be open to see what is relevant based on long-term research to other or to extend the period. And one our, I think, mission is to take from the academy specific solution or specific ideas and to take them broad in terms of the end results. Reducing the headache, that's the end result.
Thank you. Professor.
All right. I think for our case, it's still in the early stage development. But I think totally our project coming from scratch. It's totally from accidental discovery. At the beginning, we haven't really think about to commercialize such a difficult nanostructure. And because the gadolinium fluorines very expensive, probably cost us up to $100,000 per milligram. So currently the production is very expensive. So in that case, how we can push forward to start this as a potential anti-tumor drugs? I think there's looks like there is a big challenge and high risk. But in the end, we think about, so as long as we have such a big production line, and because it really is new materials, it's a new new group of materials. Even though we can't go through the approval by the authorities, but still the material is very useful because either can be counter-agent and other new uses. So we think about that we are making a new, totally new group of materials, and there are some other potential applications with that. So that's the main reason we can keep going. Although we spent a lot of money to keep this program running. But back to the biology settings, it's still very complicated. Although we publish about 60, 70 papers in the mainstream journals, but still we have a lot of things we don't understand. But that's also the beautiful parts of our study. So we won't want really, because as a basic research scientist, so not only for translation, but understanding the biology itself is very fascinating, because we propose totally a new type of strategy. So I think that itself is very interesting for us. So we probably will keep on this direction for many years, but it's still in an early stage for us. Yeah.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I want to add something else. In one view, actually, the academy and the industry are on the same side, and between all of us and the patient stands a regulatory. That's a huge wall, and I think it's very important that such conferences will take a clear message to the regulatory, because what happens here is many of the efforts here are, for example, toward hepatitis V or toward cancer. I mean, really urgent needs, and you don't see any real progression. And real part is that the walls of the regulatory is too high. And I can compare it. I work for the stent company, and indeed in stent company there is a good reason why to raise the bar, because whatever kind of stent you do now, it improves very little, if at all. But whatever you do with what we saw in hepatitis or cancer, it completely changed the rule, and the burden that the regulatory are putting on our shoulders is too high, extending the time, reducing the patents, reducing the appetite of industry. And I think in this case, we are on the same page, all of us here, and I was very encouraged to see that there are regulatory sessions here, and the clear message is reduce the burden, but whatever, I mean, make it more simple, reduce the statistics based on less number of patients, be tolerated to studies that are, for example, in FDA, tolerated to studies that are done not in FDA, like in Australia. What's wrong with that? And or in Swiss, or in Israel. And I think this is a clear message. If the nanomedicine wants to go from nano to true medicine in a reasonable time, the burden from the regulator needs to be decreased.
Yeah. You have remarks or questions from your side to these statements? It's not the case, but I have still a question now. If I see these three, and also with the hafnium oxide before. For example, in your case, Arrowhead company, Yeah, you have the polymer. Yeah, you modify the polymer. You add the drug. Yeah, you have the, let me say, the siRNA, and you add it in a, let me say, vehicle, yeah, or in the structure. Even you bring the structure directly there, yeah, and you control more or less the diffusion. Huh? I can imagine degradation rate and diffusion, and with this you control the drug delivery. I can imagine, yeah, but the drug itself is a known thing, so it's not. From principle for the biologists, I think you have a CRNA, yeah, you do the biology, yeah, and you use for the delivery. Only for the delivery, you are using the nanotechnology. We say like this. In the other two cases, from our colleague Professor Ni in Beijing, or here from nanobiotics, they are using the nanoparticle itself as a drug. Yeah? And I think still here we have two levels of nano technology going in medicine, and I have the impression in your two cases it must be simpler than, for example, if you bring a real inorganic inorganic particle in the body. What is your experience from this side? So is your part easy? Even your claiming is still complicated, but I have the impression must be easier than if you go with a nanoparticle directly as a medicament. Huh? What is your impression from this side? What do you think? Or is this your strategy? You go like this and not with a nanoparticle? Even you are claiming next step will be maybe a nanoparticle.
Well, when we decided to build the loader, it took us 3 months. And then it took us 5 years to stabilize it.
Make it, yeah.
That's a CMC. That's one. Just one more comment. I think these two companies convert the huge promise of RNA interference to applicable medicine. So the RNA or whatever kind of drug and delivery needs to be matched somehow. Yeah. So it enables us to convert huge idea to actual medicine. Of course, we can put in our loader doxorubicin.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you cannot hit, in our case, the KRAS, which is undruggable target. Yep. And they cannot do their treatments.
Right. So from our standpoint, the fact that the siRNA is the drug and the DPC is an excipient is much simpler for us from a regulatory standpoint. siRNAs are well known. You know, from a manufacturing standpoint, it doesn't really matter, you know, which is the drug and which is an excipient. But from a regulatory standpoint, it does matter, and that has been help for us.
Okay. You have maybe a remark to this? What is your experience? Because you are really still on the research side.
Yes, I totally agree with Professor Hoffman. You mentioned that relative comparison, like our case, is more complicated because it's not using known or current use drugs and use nanoparticles, nanomaterial only as a carrier to delivery. So I think even though that our gentleman already said that itself is also complicated to stabilize that system, but for us, I think the most important thing is for us we want to be the first in the category. Although we know that it's very challenging, but so far the investment totally, I think, from the government. We already contact with the potential financing options. It looks like the current situation is that the IP issue is key thing for us because we are the government-run research institute, and the IP is owned by the state or by CAS. So sometimes we talk to the investors, so they said you have to get clear beginning what's the rights and beginning. So it looks like now at least in our country, so the market just floating here and there. So there are a lot of people with deep pockets. They want to do meaningful investment, and the point is we won't want to take the risky money, and we won't be very independent. We won't want to be controlled by anybody. So certainly, probably we are trying to sort of not typical idea about having formed a company to commercialize that. Yeah. So we're in a different situation.
Okay. If there are no further remarks from your side, then let me thank again the speakers. Yeah. And with this, I close the session and we go to the coffee break. Yeah. Thank you again.